So this is going to be the technical overview video for the Reaper. We're going to go ahead and start at the back with the solenoid, and we're going to work our way to the front, and then we're going to talk about everything inside here, how to tear it down, do basic maintenance, all that kind of stuff. So, start with the solenoid. The Reaper uses our proprietary three-way solenoid. This is the same solenoid that we use in the Bolt. This is not the same solenoid as is used in the Gen 2 Inferno, Gen 2 Hydra, any of our other systems like that. So keep that in mind. That's why we don't offer upgrade kits or conversion kits, as the case may be for this, because you'd need a Bolt solenoid, not an SMP or an Inferno or Hydra solenoid. Next, I want to talk about these plugs real fast. There are 3 different plugs. There's actually 4, but 3 on the outside that you can see here. 3 different plugs on the body of the valve housing. Do not remove these. Ever. There's no need to ever remove them. These are just plugs that seal machining ports. So do not remove these. They have an air sealant, an airtight sealant on there. It's probably not something that you will have on hand to replace it if you decide to remove it. So, like all of our systems, we have toolless disassembly here. So the 2 halves of the cylinder just unscrew. Lay the system out here so you can sort of see what's going on. Alright, so that's sort of what goes on inside the system. We have our valve housing here, which is just all one piece with the little plugs in it. Again, do not remove your plugs. You have 1 O-ring on the valve housing there. The front is the cylinder. This is all one piece. You do have 1 O-ring on the inside of the cylinder here. That's a 1x7 O-ring. And then you have this little assembly. Now, for basic maintenance, there is no need to disassemble this assembly. You can lubricate your O-rings and everything just fine with this the way it is. But we will go over here in a minute how to disassemble that if you want to change nozzles or something along those lines. So this is the basic assembly. If you're just tearing it down for basic maintenance, you can lubricate the following points. You will want to lubricate this surface right here, this surface here, these O-rings on the outside, and this surface right here. If you want, you can put a little bit of lube on the outside O-ring here, but it's not really critical. After you re-lubricate it, you can just slide it back together and reassemble. And that's your basic maintenance cycle. Now I'm going to tear it all the way down. We'll talk about how to replace nozzles and O-rings and stuff like that. So we've gotten this torn back down. Let's talk about how to disassemble this assembly. What you're going to do is you're going to push the nozzle all the way to the back, and you will need a 5/16 wrench that can sit right there. If you are overseas, an 8mm wrench probably won't work, but it is sized for 5/16. On the inside, there is a 4mm Allen key. So we're going to go from the back of the nozzle, the Allen key. Now remember, since you are interacting with the front half of the nozzle here, you will need to turn it clockwise to loosen the threads, because we're going from the bottom of the threads. So we'll go clockwise, and that will break the threads loose. So this is fully disassembled, and at this point, you can replace your nozzle if you want. This is an M4 nozzle, but you could put in a different nozzle for your specific gun build. To reassemble, all we're going to do is, there are 2 sides here, look different. This is what we call, this is the front of the system. You notice there's this little U-shaped notch there. So that's the front of the system. We're going to take the nozzle back with the flared portion towards the front, and we're going to go ahead and engage that in the cage, so it sticks out the back of the cage. Now the nozzle can just go in from the front, get screwed in, tightening it down just like we loosened it. We put our wrench on our flats here, go through the back of the nozzle, and snug it down. Notice that I didn't put any Loctite on these. These do not come from the factory with Loctite. We have not found it to be necessary because the threads are very fine on the nozzle. You can add a little bit of Loctite there if it makes you feel better, but we have not really found a need for having Loctite in that location. But do make sure you tighten it down so that it's good and snug and won't come loose while it's running. Alright, so let's go ahead and pull all the O-rings off here. For this process, I highly recommend acquiring an O-ring pick. It is not essential. You can do it with say a small screwdriver like the micro screwdriver we use, but it will make your life much easier if you can have an O-ring, pick to get some of these out with. There are a couple more O-rings than on some of our other systems, so pay attention and make sure you get them all in the right places. So first off, I'm going to pull the 2 O-rings off the outside of the cage here, and then there's one that sits in a groove on the back side of the cage. All 3 of these are the same size, so we'll do those 3 and go ahead and replace them. This is the O-ring kit that will be included with your system. So we have 3 of these O-rings that are the same size here, so we'll go ahead and put them in place. There are 2 grooves at the back here. The smaller groove is the one that takes the O-ring, and then this one we will install right before we're ready to put together so it doesn't fall out, but it sits right in that groove at the back side of the cage. Now there are 2 more O-rings on the cage. There are 2 internal O-rings on both of these discs, so we'll go ahead and pop them out. Now when we get to talking about the different color nozzles and cages in a little bit, this will make more sense, but there are 2 different size O-rings for the 2 different cages. Both of those will be included in your kit. So these are the appropriate size. The black kit uses the smaller of the 2. They're 1.2 by 9s. The purple cage uses 1.2 by 10s, which are slightly larger. So just compare them, make sure that you have the right 2 for the color that you are doing. Go ahead and install these. So now all the O-rings on our cage are replaced. We can go over to the nozzle. The nozzle front and back each have 1 O-ring on them. You can pop this off and replace that with there are 2 small O-rings of the same size here, and it will just sit in the groove at the base of the threads. The next one is inside the nozzle back. We'll install the new one. Now we just got 2 more. We've done our nozzle, our cage. We can do the one on the valve body. That is the same valve body O-ring that we use on our Inferno and Hydra systems as well. Now the valve body's done, and now we just have the one that sits right up front here on the inside of the cylinder. Pop that one out. Just be patient with these if you're not used to working with small O-rings. It can be a little tedious learning the proper technique to get them in place, but they will go. So just be patient and don't make sure that you get them in the right place before you assemble it so you don't damage anything. So there are all of our O-rings swapped, and again at this point we could just continue with reassembling the unit, making sure we re-lubricate all the new O-rings real well. But now we're going to switch over and we're going to talk about the different color nozzles and cages. Alright, so you can see here we have 2 different sets of the internal assembly. The purple and the black are made to different specs. This is part of the Airsaver technology. This assembly is actually what defines the Airsaver. This is the functional part of the Airsaver. So when we talk about the Reaper being a reservoir system, this space between these 2 caps here is your reservoir. That is what fills up and then flows out to fire the BB. So that is your reservoir space. The cylinder here just seals it in on the sides. One of the final adjustments we made on the Reaper was, you noticed, those of you that watched the early video, you noticed there's no spring anymore. Now what we did here was we routed air up to the front so that the air acts instead of the spring. The spring actually was only providing part of the force. The air was pushing it both directions already, but by changing how the air routed, we were able to completely get rid of the spring. Just simplifies things and improves the performance a little bit. But what causes this nozzle to retract, because the nozzle starts in this forward position, what causes the nozzle to retract is that air is always provided on the front side of the nozzle here. So you have constant air pressure there. The air pressure on the back, holding it forward, is only supplied as long as there's pressure in the reservoir. Now the surface area on the back is larger than that on the front, so when both sides are pressurized, that is between shots, the nozzle is going to stay forward. Then as the pressure in your reservoir drops, it will get to a certain pressure where the nozzle starts to cycle back. And that's what allows it to cycle back. You notice the nozzle closes off that internal O-ring we replaced a little bit earlier. the nozzle hits that O-ring, seals off the air saver, so that's where your air saver portion comes into play, and the nozzle cycles back to load the next BB. Now, why the purple and the black? Well, one thing we found that we could do, which is a really cool option, is by changing the ratio of the two surface areas, the surface area on the front that pushes the nozzle back and the surface area on the back that pushes forward. By changing that ratio, we can adjust how much air volume is delivered to the BB. Now this allows us to optimize the system for different barrel lengths. So the black is the standard nozzle that comes with the system by default. This will work for virtually any standard barrel length. The purple is a ratio that closes earlier, so it releases less air. So generally, it's going to depend on your barrel bore, the weight BBs you're using, and all of that, but a good rule of thumb is anything up to 300 millimeters long, your barrel can use the purple nozzle if you want to. The black nozzle will work, it just won't be quite as efficient as the purple nozzle will on those short barrel builds. Anything over 300 millimeters, you need the black nozzle, or you won't be providing enough air volume to properly fire the BB. So this is just sort of a tuning option, but a few things I want to note. The nozzle back, and the cage are a matched set. In other words, you need to use a purple nozzle with a purple base and a purple cage. You can't combine a purple nozzle with a black base and a purple cage, or a black base and a black cage. All three need to be the same color, otherwise it's not going to work. So make sure, if you are ordering this, if your system has a black nozzle, that means it has a black cage. And if you want to switch to the purple nozzle, you need to get both the purple nozzle and the purple cage. You can't just get the nozzle. If you have a purple nozzle and you want to go to a longer barrel build, you need to get the black cage as well to match your new black nozzle. Alright, so do pay attention to that, just so you don't get things mixed up and end up with a system which doesn't want to run. So that being said, reassembling it with your different color nozzle is exactly the same as assembling it with the standard color nozzle. You're going to just push the nozzle and cage assembly into the cylinder and reassemble the two halves of the unit. So this has been the technical overview for the new Reaper. We hope you appreciated this video and it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below. As always, get on Facebook, give us a like, Instagram, give us a follow, and here on YouTube, give us a subscribe, so we can bring you more good content like this to help you learn everything you need to know about your Wolverine Airsoft products.